I mean, imagine a world where George Russell gets fired, basically, for driving too perfectly.
Yeah.
And Esteban Ocon is just exiled from the sport entirely. And Max Verstappen is wearing Mercedes silver.
It's wild.
Sounds like a video game glitch.
Right.
Or some fever dream you'd have after staring at timing screens for way too long.
Yeah, exactly.
But look, the contract's sitting in the paddock right now, in the dead center of this 2026 summer break. Say, this is exactly what is about to happen.
Absolutely.
You might look at the 2027 grid on paper and think, oh, it looks stagnant. But do not let this illusion of calm fool you.
Because the silence you're hearing right now, I mean, it isn't peace. It's just the sound of lawyers quietly reviewing performance clauses.
Right.
The foundation of this current grid is built on sand. And Verstappen's contract is the ultimate tripwire here.
Okay, let's unpack this.
Right.
Because you, the listener, you know that Formula One contracts aren't written in blood.
Not at all.
But usually, a multi-year deal gives you, like, some semblance of predictability. We aren't here today to talk about the safe, probable status quo.
No, we're mapping out a highly explosive, biblically proportioned domino effect, and it rests entirely on Verstappen.
Yeah, so how exactly does this tripwire work? Like, why is his contract suddenly so fragile?
Well, it comes down to the specific mechanics of the 2026 regulations, right? And how these performance clauses are actually structured.
Because they aren't just vague promises.
Exactly. They aren't just like, hey, we promised to build a good car. They are tied directly to consecutive qualifying gaps and championship points at very specific mid-season cutoffs.
Wow, so it's purely mathematical?
Pure math.
Yeah.
If Red Bull falls a certain percentage of lap time behind the benchmark constructor for, say, 3 straight races, Verstappen's legal team can lawfully shred that contract.
Oh, man.
And if you look at the telemetry from the first half of 2026, I mean, Red Bull is stalling.
Right, because the 2026 engine regulations really leveled the playing field.
Yeah.
And it seems like Red Bull's trajectory is plateauing, while Mercedes has just found something massive.
They absolutely have. Mercedes nailed the battery deployment, and the split turbo packaging under these new regs is just brilliant.
Yeah.
They have this structural aero efficiency that Red Bull is currently, like, failing to correlate in their wind tunnel. And Verstappen sees this.
Of course he does.
He needs a car that matches his prime. So the nuclear option becomes reality. Max leaves Red Bull Racing and just walks into Brackley to partner with Kimi Antonelli for 2027.
Which brings this, what, decade-long obsession to its climax?
Yeah, pretty much.
I mean, we all know Toto Wolff has been dying to get Verstappen in his car since Red Bull snatched him out of European Formula 3 years ago.
Oh, totally.
And let's be brutally honest here.
Yeah.
Doing this right after Ferrari poached Lewis Hamilton, that is Toto's cold-blooded revenge on Maranello.
Oh, it is a phenomenal chessboard move. But while Toto is willing to just detonate his entire garage structure to secure a generational talent, over at Maranello, Ferrari is weaponizing the exact opposite strategy.
Which is just total inertia.
Exactly. Ferrari doesn't need to do a single thing.
No, they have Charles Leclerc locked in well past 2028.
Yeah.
And Hamilton exercised his option for 2027 because, I mean, he looks visibly rejuvenated, right? He's chasing that 8th world title in a highly competitive car.
And they are sitting comfortably second in the constructors right now.
Yeah, so they don't need to change a thing.
Right. Fred Vasseur knows that their driver pairing is their biggest stabilizing asset. They don't need to play driver market roulette.
They need to solve their own historical demons.
Yes. Specifically, they need to stop shooting themselves in the foot with erratic mid-season car development. They just need predictable upgrades.
What about Behrman, though?
Well, Oliver Behrman is the natural heir to Hamilton's seat, obviously waiting in the wings. But putting him in for 2027 is just mathematically premature.
Yeah, because Hamilton has returned to a spectacularly competitive version of himself.
Exactly. You ride that wave until it crashes.
Okay, I understand Ferrari's strategy of stability, but I have to drag us back to Mercedes.
Go for it.
Because there is a glaring, neon-lit casualty in this master plan. George Russell.
Yep.
I mean, if Verstappen comes in, George Russell is being completely robbed.
Whoa.
No, seriously, he is being booted out the back door of Brackley. Not for a lack of pace, but simply because he is the sacrificial lamb so Toto can have his shiny new lineup.
I get the outrage, I do.
It feels like a travesty for a guy who literally carried that team through its darkest, bouncing, porpoising technical days.
Look, what's fascinating here is how quickly sentimentality evaporates when generational talent is on the table.
But it's so harsh.
You can call it a robbery, sure, but in this sport, loyalty does not yield lap time.
But his lap times are good.
Mhm.
His 2026 pace has been remarkably solid. How do you justify firing a guy who is executing flawlessly?
Because it isn't about Russell's floor, it is about the hypothetical ceiling of the alternative.
Okay, explain that.
If you have the operational capability to pair Max Verstappen, who is an anomaly of nature, with a raw, highly adaptable diamond like Kimi Antonelli,
Yeah.
you do it without blinking. Russell is a brilliant driver, but his dynamic with Verstappen would be entirely toxic.
Because they clash.
George demands equality. He demands to be the alpha. You cannot put that energy next to Verstappen. Antonelli, being younger, can be molded into the perfect high-speed understudy.
So Russell is just out.
Russell becomes an acceptable casualty. It is just pure, ruthless logic.
An acceptable casualty.
Yeah.
Wow. That is a really tough pill to swallow.
It's the business.
So if we follow the chain reaction here, if Mercedes coldly drops Russell, and Red Bull loses their sun, their moon, and their entire gravitational center in Verstappen.
Which is a massive void.
Yeah. How on earth does the energy drink empire rebuild from the ashes? You don't just replace a 3-time world champion with a rookie.
No, you panic. But you panic in a highly calculated way. Red Bull has to cover a gigantic void, not just in lap time, but in their actual brand identity. They need a heavy hitter who can jump in and instantly deliver race wins.
And who's that?
They are going to find one by exploiting the internal pressure cooker over at McLaren. They are going to snatch Oscar Piastri.
Whoa. Piastri walking away from McLaren to lead Red Bull.
Yep.
Teaming up with Isaac Hadjar, who I assume stays in the second seat to validate their junior program.
Exactly, Hadjar stays.
But wait, why would Piastri leave McLaren? They have a winning car.
Because of the internal mechanics at Woking, I mean, Piastri is exhausted from living in Lando Norris's shadow.
Is he really in the shadow, though? Look at the upgrade schedules over the last 2 years. Norris almost always gets the new floor or the new front wing first.
That's true.
There is a clear internal priority there, no matter what Andrea Stella's PR machine says. Enter Mark Webber.
Piastri is manager.
Right, and he operates like a chess grandmaster. Webber sees the Verstappen-sized vacuum at Red Bull as the ultimate structural opportunity. So it's about securing unquestioned #1 status.
Precisely. Webber knows Oscar can become the definitive team leader at Red Bull. And Red Bull gets a driver who brings significantly less media baggage than Max, but who provides ice-cold sporting guarantees.
Yeah, Piastri doesn't crack under pressure.
Never. He is the perfect systemic replacement for a team that desperately needs stability at the front.
But McLaren isn't going to just take that lying down. If Piastri walks out the door, Woking has to counterpunch.
Absolutely.
And in this scenario, they bring Carlos Sainz back to Woking to partner Lando Norris.
It makes complete structural sense. I mean, Sainz knows Woking inside and out from his 2019 and 2020 stint.
Right.
He was fundamental to their initial recovery era. He is a vastly more complete driver now, a proven race winner, and he fits perfectly into Andrea Stella's management philosophy.
Okay, let me stop you right there.
Sure.
Because this is where the logic feels completely flawed to me.
Yeah.
So what does this all mean for George Russell? Why wouldn't McLaren take George Russell over Carlos Sainz? Russell is suddenly a free agent in this timeline.
Wow.
Sainz to McLaren feels like a purely romantic reunion story. It's a feel-good PR move. But isn't that just settling for a safe baseline?
It's not about romance.
If Red Bull has Piastri and Mercedes has Verstappen, doesn't McLaren need Russell's raw qualifying ceiling just to survive the front row?
You are looking purely at one-lap pace and ignoring the operational reality of running a Formula One team.
Okay, so enlighten me.
It is not romance, it is data. Andrea Stella operates on a strict culture of collaboration. The dynamic between Sainz and Norris is a known, proven, highly effective data point.
Right.
They push each other without crashing into each other.
And you think Russell would crash into Norris?
I think George Russell, especially after being ousted by Mercedes, is going to demand unquestioned #1 status wherever he lands.
That makes sense.
He is going to be driven by a need to prove Toto Wolff wrong. McLaren cannot give him that primary status alongside Lando Norris.
Oh, because Lando is their guy.
Exactly. Bringing Russell into that garage would ignite a civil war. They would bleed points, taking points off each other. Sainz is the tactical, stabilizing counterpunch that ensures both cars finish in the points every single Sunday.
Okay, so Andrea Stella essentially slams the door in Russell's face to protect the team culture.
Pretty much.
Where does a displaced, highly motivated Mercedes driver go when the top three teams are locked?
He ends up at the sleeping German giant, Audi.
Audi.
Yes, Audi secures George Russell on a massive long-term deal. They pair him with Gabriel Bortoleto, who has become their untouchable developmental project for the future.
Which means Nico Hülkenberg is pushed into retirement at 39 years old.
Yeah, unfortunately.
After everything he did to transition that Sauber team into the Audi era, that is brutal.
It is brutal for Hülkenberg. He has been the structural backbone of that transition. But for Audi to enter 2027 and signal to the paddock, hey, we are a serious works team, we are here to win.
They need a statement.
Exactly. They have to make a marquee signing. They cannot enter the new era with a midfield veteran.
But why would Russell take that deal? Like, Audi is going to be a massive step backward in 2027 on purely sporting terms. They won't be fighting for wins immediately.
Because Audi isn't just buying Russell for his 2027 lap times. They are buying the massive chip on his shoulder.
Ah, I see.
Look at the upside for George. He gets a colossal salary. He gets undisputed leadership of a factory team to build around his exact feedback. And crucially, he gets a vengeance-driven mission.
He wants to beat Mercedes.
They need a driver who wakes up every morning wanting to destroy Mercedes. That kind of anger, channeled correctly, is a phenomenal team-building asset.
It is the ultimate revenge arc. But while Audi is making these ruthless, calculating decisions to build a serious factory lineup, let's look at what is happening over at Aston Martin.
Oh, boy.
Yeah, now I know what you listening right now are thinking. With all this elite talent shuffling around, Verstappen, Sainz, Piastri, Russell, surely Aston Martin capitalizes on the chaos.
You'd think so.
But they don't. They shockingly keep Lance Stroll alongside Fernando Alonso. Here's where it gets really interesting, because my blood is boiling just looking at this boardroom math.
I can tell.
It is a historic squandering of a potential dream team. Aston Martin has a grid in chaos, and they keep Stroll.
Well, your outrage is entirely justified from a sporting perspective, but you have to qualify it with the corporate reality of what Aston Martin actually is.
But they have the 2026 Honda spec engine. They have Adrian Newey's aerodynamic philosophy finally showing light at the end of the tunnel. And they are wasting one of those seats.
I hear you.
You cannot fight a Mercedes with Verstappen or a Ferrari with Hamilton when you are fighting with one arm tied behind your back.
Look, if we connect this to the bigger picture, Lawrence Stroll has poured hundreds of millions into wind tunnels, simulators, and snapping up the greatest aerodynamic mind in the history of the sport in Adrian Newey.
Exactly my point.
But as long as the second seat at that team is not decided by ruthless sporting criteria, they have a permanent glass ceiling.
Explain that ceiling to me. Because if Newey builds a rocket ship, shouldn't it not matter who's driving it?
It matters in the Constructors' Championship. No matter what aerodynamic magic Newey weaves, if one side of the garage cannot consistently execute on race day to support the strategy, they will fail.
Okay, yeah.
If Alonso is fighting Verstappen for a win, but Stroll is stuck in P11, unable to trigger an undercut or block a pit window, Aston Martin is mathematically neutralized.
They just get out-strategized.
Alonso stays because he sees the technical data from the wind tunnel, but Aston Martin will remain an incomplete equation until both seats are earned by merit.
It is a tragedy for the sport, truly. But while the billionaires are playing fantasy motorsport at the front of the grid, let's pivot to the desperate midfielders.
The fun stuff.
Yeah, because while the top teams play chess, the midfield is basically playing Russian roulette. The rookie meat grinder is in full effect. Let's start with Racing Bulls. They officially axe Liam Lawson.
Yeah, this is where the Red Bull system really shows its teeth. Lawson had his shot in the big team to prove he was the undeniable generational heir, and he plateaued. He failed to definitively lock it down.
But he wasn't terrible, like he scored points.
The Red Bull machine does not care about good enough. It demands another Max Verstappen. When Lawson stopped showing exponential growth, his fate was sealed.
Wow.
So they look straight at the F2 leaderboard. They bring in Nicholas Soloff, who is sitting on 167 points and dominating the junior category, to run alongside Arvid Lindblad.
Solov is the shiny new toy, and Lawson is just discarded. It is cutthroat.
Extremely.
But maybe not as desperate as the situation over at Williams. The FW48 has been a catastrophic disaster in 2026.
A total mess.
Sainz took one look at the telemetry and ran away back to McLaren. So team principal James Vowles is sweating bullets, and he pairs Alex Albon with Yuki Tsunoda.
Yeah.
How does that move the needle for teams struggling at the back?
You have to look at the specific nature of the FW48's failure. They severely miscalculated the cooling requirements and aerodynamic balance for the 2026 power units.
Right.
Vowles desperately needs technical stability to fix a fundamentally flawed concept. He cannot afford a rookie who is going to bin the car in practice sessions while they are running aero rakes.
So Tsunoda is basically a survival mechanism.
Exactly. Tsunoda brings 5 years of Formula One experience, he brings deep, nuanced technical feedback, and crucially, he brings Honda financial backing.
Ah, the money.
It is a pragmatic, survivalist move for a team that is drowning and needs to keep the lights on while they redesign the chassis.
Survival mode. Which brings us to Haas. And this is the move that leaves me in total disbelief.
Let me guess, Ocon.
Yes. They drop Esteban Ocon out of Formula One entirely. A race winner. A guy with hundreds of starts, just gone.
Yep.
And they pair Oliver Behrman with the F3 and F2 champion Leonardo Fornaroli. I just do not understand how a proven talent like Ocon is left without a chair when the music stops.
That is the cold, hard reality of the modern salary cap and the midfield ceiling.
Ow, so?
We'll look at it from a team principal's perspective. Ocon is a known entity. He has a historically problematic floor. I mean, he frequently alienates his side of the garage and clashes with teammates.
True. He does have that reputation.
And what did that experience yield for Haas in 2026? A handful of points and a hefty veteran salary.
So you're saying a rookie is just better business?
Mathematically, yes. Midfield teams would rather gamble on the unknown, potentially sky-high ceiling of a rookie like Fornaroli than pay a premium for the known problematic floor of a veteran.
That makes sense.
Fornaroli impressed massively in his Barcelona FP1 outings. McLaren can't promote him because their seats are full, so they park him at Haas, just like they facilitated the Bortolito deal to Audi.
Oh, wow.
Haas gets a cheap, highly motivated champion, and Ocon is sidelined by the harsh economics of the sport.
It really is a new model for the back half of the grid.
It is.
Just to round out the picture real quick, Alpine retains Pierre Gasly and Franco Colapinto. I have to say, Colapinto genuinely earned that renewal, despite the Enstone factory basically being in a permanent state of technical alarm.
Yeah, he drove the wheels off that thing.
And Cadillac keeps Sergio Perez and Valtteri Bottas, mostly because Colton Herta severely underperformed in F2 and mathematically ruined his super license hopes.
Cadillac is a nascent project. Perez and Bottas were hired to build a foundation. You don't fire the architects while the house is only half built, right?
Right.
Especially when your intended American star couldn't secure the requisite license points to legally drive the car. It is a forced status quo, but a necessary one to keep their development on track.
Man. So let's pull back and look at the sheer scale of the bloodbath we've just mapped out today.
It's massive.
If Verstappen's performance clause triggers this domino effect, the 2027 season is going to be completely unhinged.
Oh, absolutely.
You know, you are looking at a championship fight with Max Verstappen in a Mercedes, Lewis Hamilton in a Ferrari, and a newly liberated Oscar Piastri leading Red Bull. Does this scenario completely shatter the championship fight?
It shatters it into a million microscopic pieces.
I can't wait.
I mean, you have the greatest drivers of their respective generations sitting in the top 3 cars, all with entirely new internal team dynamics.
Yes.
And all operating with massive chips on their shoulders. You have Verstappen out to prove he didn't need Adrian Newey, Hamilton out to prove he can conquer Ferrari, and Piastri out to prove he is a Tier 1 apex predator. It is the perfect storm.
It is the absolute dream scenario for anyone watching this sport.
Yeah.
But, you know, walking through all these moves, all these lawyers activating hidden clauses, it leaves you with a really cynical thought about the business side of Formula One.
Well, this raises an important question about the modern era of the sport. If an entire grid representing hundreds of millions of dollars in driver market value and sponsor equity can be completely reorganized just by one single driver activating a performance tripwire.
Yeah.
Does the concept of team loyalty or long-term contracts even exist anymore? Or are we definitively entering an era where a contract in Formula One is nothing more than a very expensive suggestion?
That is heavy.
I want to know what you think. Get down in the comments right now and tell us if loyalty is truly dead in motorsport.
Seriously, you need to weigh in on this because the implications are just massive. And look, while you're down there, make sure you are following Paddock Notes everywhere.
But that subscribe button.
Yeah, subscribe on YouTube, follow us on Instagram, and get on our TikTok. Because the chaos in this paddock literally never stops.
Never.
And we are going to be breaking down every single telemetry trace, wind tunnel rumor, and contract dispute. The championship might be decided on the asphalt, but the real race, the war for dominance, happens right here in the analysis.
We'll be watching.
Keep your eyes on the paddock. We'll see you on the next deep dive.